Hello, my name is Adam,
And I'm Adrian.
and welcome to Cast from the Crypt. Today is a very special episode, I feel like, because we're talking about a movie that is such an icon of the horror genre and a film I personally love, and that is, of course, Pet Sematary, the original 1989 film.
A new favorite of mine now.
Had you seen it before?
No, I've seen clips. I've
Oh,
seen all the
really?
famous clips. Yeah, the Achilles heel cut, the uh, sometimes dead is better. Like, oh,
Oh,
that whole thing,
I've been quoting
but
this man to
never.
you for years, and you didn't.
Well, I've read the book, so I've
I
always
guess.
understood the quote.
Yeah,
Just never. I mean, because even in the book, it's written that way.
that's I think is so funny because Stephen King really does write characters like that.
Yeah, he does. He does. Um, yeah. What's funny is I find this book, as a huge Stephen King fan, I find this book to be like hugely overrated. I think it's by far his most overrated book, but I love this movie.
I haven't read the book, and I really wanted to after seeing this. So,
No, you can borrow my copy, but yeah, I
oh,
mean,
thanks.
it's I don't know. I find it overrated, but there's something about this movie, right?
Yeah, it. Well, let's look at all the Stephen King movies. They're never like the best. you know, they're
No.
they're usually pretty bad. And when you get a diamond in the rough like this, that's a faithful adaptation that is really just hits it out of the ballpark and becomes so well known. It's so good to see. I really love uh, the ambition these 80s 90s directors have to be adapting Stephen King novels, but when they adapt it successfully, it's so satisfying to see.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what's funny is like every time I'm talking about Stephen King, I always talk about how bad the adaptations of his books are. But in reality, some of the movies are some of the best adaptations of all time, right? Shawshank Redemption, Stand By Me, Green Mile. Like there are some hits there. And this movie, I do not think is a critical success. And I don't think it was considered a good one, but I love this movie.
I don't know. Well, it has so much going for it. Like so much just works, and it is by far not perfect. Make no mistake about that. It is not perfect. It has a lot of stuff wrong that you'd see in a typical like cheesy Stephen King adaptation. But when it's doing something right, it's really doing it right. And because you see so many things in this movie are pulled off so well, you come to accept and even enjoy the parts of it that aren't done so well. They give it just such character and charm. And I think if this movie was perfect, maybe it wouldn't even, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have that same nostalgic sort of appeal to it that it has now.
Yeah, that's true. I agree with that. And I also think that this isn't your usual good bad movie. This is right. There are some good performances here, genuinely. Like I think personally, the guy that plays Judd, the
Oh,
actor named Fred Gwynn, I think he's great.
I'd love to talk about him. I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna rant about him forever, but
Good. We'll put a pin in
yeah,
that, I
continue. I'm
suppose. But
sorry.
like I think he's great. I think the child actor in this movie, Miko Hughes, who still does work from time to time, but the guy that plays Gage, I think he does a pretty good job too, considering he was 3 years old.
Um, yeah.
No, you disagree there?
I mean, he's like a 3-year-old. Like, has no
Yeah, but
concept
they
of the
did a good
fact that he's
job
in a
with him.
movie. I feel like
Though, I don't know.
they did,
His
but he's
his,
also a 3-year-old.
his concept for language or his grasp of language was pretty impressive for a 3-year-old.
I guess that's true. He did just develop, not but a few years earlier had only just developed object permanence. So I guess that is pretty impressive to go from in a span of maybe 2 years, object permanence to successful acting career.
Exactly. My point.
Yeah. Um,
No, and then I also think that some of the gore in this movie is pretty good too. Like I think there's things that are working for it.
yeah, I say some things that don't work so well for it. um, some of the acting sometimes is really hammy. This movie can be over dramatic at times, but on the flip side, sometimes the performances are shockingly well. They're shockingly good, and the drama, the emotion in a lot of the scenes are like surprising. Like so many times rewatching this movie, I've seen it before. I was like, oh, it's cheesy. I mean, it is a little bit cheesy. There's a lot of cheesy stuff that happens in it. But rewatching it, I was amazed at how many times I found myself like genuinely impressed by this movie. Like, oh, this performance is great. This scene is great. Like, I feel the emotion, and so many times in this movie where you don't expect to, and that's why I loved it so much.
Yeah, I agree. I came into this expecting a hokey Stephen King adaptation, and I left getting that. But real credit to the person behind the camera, Mary Lambert, who I know has directed other horror movies, but I don't know exactly what. I know that she did Pet Sematary. Excuse me. I know that she did Pet Cemetery too. Um, and funny enough, the first thing that I know her from is that she directed Bobby Brown's famous hit song music video, "My Prerogative."
Yeah, I did want to touch on her too. She directing wise is kind of like all over the place. I feel like she's directed a lot of different things that I feel like kind of don't relate. Like she directed that music video. She also directed the Like a Prayer music video, the Madonna song. Um, and the most recent thing she's done was she directed an episode of Law and Order SVU. So like she's kind of all over the place. But
She's on the up and up.
I'm so glad she directed this movie. Clearly she shows some competence at least, and it was refreshing to see a female director behind such an iconic horror film, especially in 1989. Like there's a shocking lack of female directors, and that is especially true in the horror genre. So
Yeah.
getting such a good movie like this out of a female director is a breath of fresh air. It's something you don't ever get, and I love it when it happens.
And it's honestly, it's even too rare to this day.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
But no, I think she did a great job. The semi truck baby sequence, that's what I'm going to call it,
Oh
um,
wow.
is primarily the one that I think kind of blew me away.
Just the way it was shot, or what?
Well, the way it was shot and the way it was cut, right? Like uh, the fast truck coming down the hill, that's something that they describe in the book a lot, is just how they foreshadow really hard in the book. And I think the movie captures that pretty well. You know something's going to happen on that road, even before Church, their cat, gets hit by the truck. You know that that's just not a good situation. Those semis coming down so quickly. But in the scene where Gage is flying the kite, just the cuts from the kid going away, and then Lewis's attention being grabbed by his daughter and his wife and Judd on the other side. And it's you're juxtaposing this beautiful picnic scene with this almost horrific thing that's just about to happen. And then it does. And there's the really interesting choice, and who knows who made it. I don't know if it was a director's choice or an editor, but to have the baby pictures fall on the cement, right? I don't know. I thought it was kind of a chilling sequence. I really liked it. It felt corny in a 1989 way, but I liked it. And I thought it was really effective.
Yeah, yeah, no, but there's a lot of examples of things that I'm like, oh wow, Can
Yeah,
we? I
that's just one.
I'm all over the place. Can we just get into the movie and like go along with the plot and talk about things we like?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, yeah. So jumping in with both feet, I guess. The Creed family moves into a rural town in Maine. It's a young couple. Lewis, he's a doctor, and his wife Rachel. They have two tiny children. Their daughter's name is Ellie, and they have a 3-year-old child named Gage, and he is the cutest baby I have ever seen.
Yeah, they absolutely knew what they were
Yeah,
doing
and
casting that
they
kid.
casted this cute child, and throughout the movie, there's so many scenes that it feels like, look at how cute this baby is. Look at how cute this baby is. Like that's too much of this movie, and then obviously you're like, oh, they're dragging it in
Which,
front of you because you know.
not to get into it now, but the cuteness does end up being detrimental to the movie later.
Yeah, no, I
but
think so too. But
we'll get there.
yeah, um, but they've moved into this small town. Lewis is now like the local physician, and they moved into this house in a beautiful field. It's a beautiful home, but location, location, location. It's right off of a highway where semis go through at 100 miles an hour. And across this highway is another house where this old man, this old farming type named Judd Crandall lives, and he talks like that, and it's very fun. And that's it. There's no other houses around. But
And you do a great job of doing that accent, and yet it's even more ridiculous in the movie.
yeah, it's so extreme. It's
Yeah,
so
but
extreme.
apparently, like Northern Mainers really talk like that.
I think they do, yeah. Because it is extreme, but also Fred Gwynne's performance is amazing, and he somehow makes you believe it. Makes you believe that's his accent.
Yeah, no, he makes you believe it. You forget about it within 5 minutes because you accept that this is your reality. And also, he is so likable. He manages to be such a caricature, but bring the humanity out of that character all at the same time. Because I was with him throughout the whole movie.
I could not have said that better. Throughout this whole movie, like a lot of the acting's cheesy in this movie. I think Dale Midkiff, who plays Lewis, who is the main character, this young doctor, I think many, many times in this scene, he's like really hamming it up. It's pretty cheesy, uh, very dramatic. But anytime Fred Gwynne was like having a dramatic scene or telling a story or anything, I was like, oh my god, this man is so good. This performance is amazing. And he's most famous for like the other thing he did that he's like really famous for is he's Herman Munster in the 60s TV show.
Yeah, which of course,
Which
super fitting.
yeah, and like that's what he's known for. And then in this movie he's amazing. I love this man in this movie. Did you think he was like the greatest thing since sliced bread? Because I loved him in
I
this
did.
movie.
I did. No, we were watching it, and like, I'm going to do my best to describe this. There is a phenomenon when you watch any movie from the 1970s to the 1980s where you have to ask yourself, is this a good performance? I don't know if you've ever
I
experienced
I
that.
no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
You have to ask yourself, is this good? And with this guy, I knew it was good. I loved it. I bought it. I've never been to Northern Maine, but I imagine that this is pretty faithful to what they're like because I trust Stephen King's knowledge of what a Northern Mainer would sound like, right? And I know that that's how he wrote the character. Um, Therefore, I'm going to say this is an accurate portrayal, and I'm very, very complimentary toward Mr. Gwynn's performance in this.
I am too. There's so much subtlety to his performance. Like he, like you said, is so likable, the friendly rural neighbor. And then there's also just a tinge of like an ominous mystery to him. There's just a few ways he says a few lines or leaves maybe like says there's a few quotes that are very open-ended. Uh that it's like a little scary, a little bit like, okay, well, he knows something right off the bat. Um, but he's also like, he is the reality. He grounds every character. He is the voice of reason throughout this movie, and he just does such a good job. he's he's said it's
Yeah.
such a good performance. Fred Gwynn actually died 4 years after this performance, so like this is right.
Really?
Yeah, I know, tragically, but that's I
What
guess
was
why
the
you didn't.
cause of death?
I'm not sure, but
I mean, he was
that's why.
older, but
Yeah, he was an older gentleman, but that's why you don't see him in anything after this. But I wish we
what a lovely
did.
way you said that.
He- what?
He was an older gentleman. That was very
I
sweet.
was thinking. Yeah. No, he's. I wish he'd lived longer, just so we could see him in other things. I mean, I couldn't get enough of him. I ate him up.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Now, to be honest, you talked about how Dale Midkiff, how his performance kind of fell on you, and how you thought he was hamming it up. God Almighty, I was wishing he would make a choice, just
Well,
do something. Like I thought he was so boring, and then to watch Fred Gwynn next to him, it really just murdered this man's
yeah,
potential to enthrall me or pull me in at all.
and he's not really in anything besides a few kind of like unremarkable rom coms.
Yeah, and I can see why.
I agree with you. Like, yeah, he is pretty flat one note, and but like, there's a few scenes like when Gage gets hit by the truck, and like you talked about how great a scene is, but at the end of that scene, he yells no, and it's ridiculous. It's really like okay, like you're not buying
Oh
it.
yeah,
You're not buying his
no, not at
grief.
all.
And then for the rest of the movie is very dead, kind of deadpan, kind of not giving that much. So yeah, I think he's either like not giving enough or giving far too much.
Well,
So yeah,
poor guy.
it's in yeah, like you said, next to Fred, he's not nearly as impressive, sadly.
Just incredibly unremarkable. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Creed family lives in this house next to this highway, and immediately right off the bat, they find a little pathway at the back of their property, and Judd shows them this, what's down the path, and it's a pet cemetery that is old, rotting, decrepit. The lore behind it is that it was made by children, just to bury their pets, and there was such a need for it because of the highway. Dogs, cats, they'd wander into the road and then get hit by these semis. So the kids of the town got together, made this pet cemetery, and it's misspelled with an S. Um, and it's been there like ever since Judd was a boy, and it's kind of like absolutely fallen apart. It was shoddily built by children in the first place, so it it looks amazing. This set is so impressive. It
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's the first thing we see as the movie opens. It's literally just scenes of the pet cemetery, just kind of the camera slowly moving around. And it's so atmospheric. Like this white picket fence that they've used as the border of the cemetery that's rotting after what you can imagine is 50 plus, 60 plus years of just being there. It's all the graves are made out of just like broken pieces of wood. Uh, Judd's dog is buried there, and it's just like a piece of clay that he carved the dog's name in and then used as a headstone. The tree cover over the place has made the lighting very soft and ominous, even in broad daylight. And there's a huge, just like mound of what appear to be like fallen timber and like dead, decaying wood behind the thing. It looks amazing. Like, what a great set this is. Like,
Yeah,
so
and
atmospheric.
it's really atmospheric, and they do a great job building up to the reveal. Early on in the movie, I think several characters. I don't think it's just uh, Lewis, but they all kind of want to know what is up the trail, right? What the path leads to. Ellie, who is Gage's older sister, I think asks about it as well, and of course that's telling because eventually they have to use it to bring her cat back, right? But the lead up is good. I mean, I found it to be good. Sometimes with these adaptations, Stephen King adaptations in particular, the pacing is just all off. It's either like just there's nothing and you don't care about any of the characters because there's no build, or they don't quite get into it. That's something that I heard that the characters were particularly shallow in the newest Pet Sematary movie. So there's no buy-in. But I think this movie does a great job of slowly getting into the world, and then when you're in it, you are in it. You know what I mean? Uh, I found the pacing to be really solid, and this movie's only 103 minutes, so it's a light watch. Um, and I'm very complimentary toward the way they handled that.
Yeah, I mean, I was eating this movie up every second of this movie. It like you were. There's no slog. You're engaged the entire time. Great point. And that's all pretty close to the beginning. Like they've done a great job of like they set it up. They built mystery and intrigue about the pet cemetery and then showed the pet cemetery all somehow within like 10 minutes of the movie starting, like really soon. And then we have our plot from there. So Lewis, his first day on the job, he's the doctor at like a college, I think, and we see this group of students like covered in blood, all carrying this bloody, like you think body at this point, and you don't really get a good look at it, but then the students parade it like right in front of the camera and into the building Lewis is working in, where he's supposed to save this man's life. And as they do, you see right in front of the camera his exposed brain. I think he's been hit by a truck. And immediately I was shocked at how good this effect was. I feel like I
Yeah.
watched a man get hit by a truck. Like it was so realistic, frighteningly
Oh,
realistic.
yeah, it's disgusting. I was trying my damnedest to find who did the effects on this movie because I bet you anything it's somebody that we know and that we've seen their work before. Because it's just too good. You know, it's not just some Joe Blow off the street. Like,
I found out who did the makeup.
oh, good.
Yeah, it's a man named Dave Anderson, and he's been
Has
in
he done
a
anything we've seen?
yeah, he's done like he was in Men in Black. He did the effects for Cabin in the Woods, and he's worked on like quite a few seasons of American Horror Story, I think. So he's like in the
That's right.
business and in the genre for sure.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Later on, Pascal, who is the student that unfortunately got messed up by a car and his brain is exposed now, he comes as like a premonition to Lewis throughout the whole movie, actually. And the zombie ghost premonition makeup is not very good. It's actually pretty lame. And it's kind of shocking, like that both are in the same movie. That really gnarly exposed brain is in the same movie as that, like, I don't know, Galveston haunted house makeup.
Yeah, no, but that's the thing about this movie. There's so many like effects that I'm like, wow, because you remember this as being a cheesy late 80s Stephen King adaptation, and then they show something that is so impressive, so something you did not expect. But then it'll be like juxtaposed to something that looks absolutely terrible. Like they had this absolutely, like I really thought it was bone-chillingly realistic. It was so realistic, so frighteningly realistic, this man's exposed brain. And in the same movie, and the cat too, when the cat gets harmed, or when they find the cat's like dead corpse, they have to, you know, getting ahead of ourselves, but Church eventually dies, and they have to scrape his body off of Judd's lawn, and they find it like the next morning after a freeze, and it's in Maine, so they have to like the ground sticks to Church's flesh, and it's the rigor mortis is set in, and it looks so realistic and so like gut wrenching. But then later in the movie, when Church comes back to life, Church kills a rat and throws the body in uh, Lewis's bed, and it's the fakest looking rat I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's like something you could buy at Petco.
It's you could buy it at Petco for like your cat, like as a cat toy. It looks so dumb. And I was like, just like, how are they in the same movie? I was like, this same movie that had that exposed bleeding brain cannot make a fake rat. You know?
No, that's hilarious that you brought that up because I was actually thinking the same thing. It it's so inconsistent. And then I know that you just brought up church and that we kind of got ahead, but like the cat acting later on, really good when they get him to like act all dead or not dead, but I hope you know what scene I'm
Yeah,
talking
no,
about.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like the cat is like this is what I mean by you were like the kid act is a really good actor. Like, I think the cat was a better actor.
Oh, the cat deserved every treat it
Yeah.
got. It did some cool stuff.
Yeah, not to disparage the kid because like me, I watched it with my brother, and the entire time we kept saying like, this cat is a really good actor. Like, it's really impressive the things
Yeah.
they get this cat to do.
Right. And cats are so difficult to train. Like I don't know who trained that cat, but kudos to them.
Yeah, that cat put in the work. It earned its, I say paycheck, but it
It's
probably just
fancy
got like a
feast.
bowl of kibble. Yeah, some fancy feast bowl of kibble,
Yeah.
a treat.
But we could get into the cat now.
Well, let me end that
It
thought.
haunts him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just before the man dies in front of him because there's no saving him. His exposed bleeding brain, he's dead. He shoots up, like sits up. You think he's dead, and he shoots up and grabs Lewis's shirt and tells him like, "I'm gonna come see you later. I'm gonna warn you. I'm gonna help you." And then throughout the movie, he appears as like a ghost who repeatedly warns Lewis about using the pet cemetery, about the evils of the pet cemetery. And he keeps saying that he wants to help Lewis because Lewis tried to help him. And it's all well and good when he first shot up like that. Like, oh wow, I thought that was really, kind of, oh wow, that was really scary. It scared me at first, but then this actor who plays him is like, this is what I mean by the hammy acting. He's like really hamming it up.
Oh yeah, he's
He's
horrible.
yeah, he's really bad. So it
Yeah.
kind of takes away all of the fear from this character, but he's not the main attraction. Shortly after this, it's Thanksgiving. Um, Lewis's family is going to go visit his wife Rachel's parents, but he can't come because he has to work. So they all leave without him. He's alone in the home, of course, with his daughter's cat, Church. And that's when, while everybody's gone, the cat gets hit by a truck. They find it the next morning. They have to like peel its corpse off the lawn, like I said. And let's get into church now that we're all caught up.
Yeah, so he does what I think anybody would do, right? He kicks back. He hangs out with Judd, his new friend, his neighbor. And in a series of unfortunate events, Church dies on that very dangerous highway. He gets hit by a truck and ends up on Judd's lawn. Judd actually tells Lewis that this has happened. And this is when Judd decides that he should take Lewis past the pet cemetery, deeper into the wood, to a mysterious Native American burial ground. I think we all know that this trope has aged horribly, but nonetheless, that is this is the big part of the movie, right? The initial use of the Micmac burial grounds to bring back something. Judd thinks that it's best that he brings back the cat for his daughter, because if not, she'll be devastated, and it's a hard thing to explain to a child. You also get the sense that since he went through this as a kid and he lost his own pet as well, he talks about how good of a dog Spot was earlier on in the movie, and he connects with Ellie on that. But he has a big heart, and I think in this moment he truly does think that Lewis is doing the right thing by bringing Church back. Now, in this scene, would you agree with me that like Lewis is not really believing what's happening?
Yeah, well, I was talking about this with my brother. Judd does not explain at all what's
Right.
happening. He just says, "Take the corpse and follow me into the woods." And We were like, why is he doing this? Why are you showing him this? This is why everything goes wrong. Do not tell him about the cursed burial ground. But also, if I lived alone next to a highway and then some guy moved in that I'm kind of buddying up with across the street, I would also probably be like, "You want to see some shit?"
Yeah, true, but
Like,
like, but he does earlier on in the movie. There's a whole scene, and as you can imagine, it's actually a much bigger thing in the book too. I hate to be that guy, but uh, he freaks out Ellie. Judd does when they're at the pet cemetery because he talks about death, and it's clear that she has zero grasp on it. And he talks about how he buried Spot and what a good dog Spot was, and I think that that's really his motivation here. That's what I get from it. Is that his motivation is he thinks it's best for the kid to just not have to have that conversation yet. It's almost like him making amends for freaking her out the first time.
yeah, he doesn't have the heart to just teach her about death and how the world works. And correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, the overall themes of like accepting death, going through the grieving process, that is much clearer in the book. Like it's more of an overarching theme that connects all the events in the books together, if that makes sense, because there's a few scenes, a few aspects of this movie that it's like seemingly this really doesn't have anything to do with anything, but it's cool
Right.
anyway. Like Pascal the jogger who dies doesn't really have to be in the movie, and Rachel has this whole plot with her sister that is not so relevant, but I think in the book it's this idea of like grasping the concept of death and accepting it as a part of the grieving process, and I think
Yeah,
that it's a
for
bit
sure.
more better integrated than in this movie. But then of course, it is a short 103-minute movie. They got to
Right. They
crank it
can't
out.
they can't go into it too much.
Yeah.
So what happens is what we all know, right? The cat resurrects. And the very next day, when Lewis is around the house, he sees Church. And Church is matted. They clearly put the cat in some like pet safe goo. He moves slowly and he's more aggressive towards Lewis. Um, which is also interesting. His demeanor has changed entirely. And this does lead us into a sequence in which Judd reveals that he has used the burial grounds before. He did once as a kid as well with his dog. Uh, but unfortunately, he had to kill his dog because when he came back, it was too different.
Yeah, and they do this fantastic effect a few times in the movie where Church hisses and his eyes like have this yellow flare in them,
Mm-hmm.
and it looks so good, and he looks like such a cursed cat. Like he does such a good job, and like we said earlier, they get this cat to do like anything and everything. There's a scene where he jumps up and like claws Lewis in the face, like immediately after coming back from the dead. And normally, in a typical cheesy movie, you'd have a fake cat that like you'd pretend is attacking you, but like no, this is that real cat. You can tell is doing
Yeah.
this, and they really are getting it to like hiss on command. Supposedly there's one scene I watching the movie, I didn't notice it. I couldn't tell you what scene, but there's supposed to be a scene where like the cat hisses or something, and you can evidently like in the corner of the camera like see a treat or like a bowl of kibble that they're like trying, that they're using to get the cat to do these tricks. But
Oh wow, really?
yeah, evidently, but like if anything, that proves like they're getting this cat to do all these things. There's a scene at the end of the movie where Lewis injects Church with a syringe, and like you can see the cat like going sedate and like falling on the ground and like quits moving, and it's breathing heavily, but it's not moving. And like they got the cat to play dead.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Props to this freaking cat. Like I've never seen a cat used this much in any movie. I don't think.
No, me neither.
and
Me neither.
it's such a good job. Like
I'm glad I'm not alone in being entirely impressed by this cat yesterday because I was blown away when I was watching the movie.
it, yeah, no, it really does so much.
Um, the cat, of course, is only the beginning for this movie, right? Um, we have now seen, and Lewis has now seen, what the Micmac burial grounds can do. Um, but now his family has come back from their Thanksgiving trip, and well, you know what's coming. For me, this was a really hard scene, actually. Gage's death.
Yeah, no, me too.
I thought it was really effective. They're having, probably just a nice get together on a Sunday or whatever. The sun is out. They live on this beautiful pasture in, northern Maine, and the sun is shining, and Lewis is showing his son to ride a kite while Judd and Ellie and his wife are sitting at the table enjoying a meal and iced tea or lemonade.
Yeah,
It's
it's
just a
like
picturesque scene.
cartoonishly happy. Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. They're laughing, they're having a great time. And as his wife and his daughter are calling him towards the table, he lets Gage go and he takes his eyes off of Gage. And Gage is flying a kite, and the kite starts moving further and further. And sure enough, he starts to run towards the road. The way that this is cut, where you see Lewis's face stare and know that he's not going to catch up to Gage. And his wife, it does a hard cut to his wife, and she says, "Get him, get him." And he sprints, and there's that wide shot of him sprinting towards the road, screaming, and you know what's going to happen. And you see the semi, hard cut to just a baby's shoe flying in the air. It is gut wrenching.
yeah.
It is such a good sequence. The editing is so just tight.
Oh man. And then they just like I think immediately after he gets hit by the truck, they just cut to baby pictures.
Yeah.
And then so it's just a series of baby pictures, and then the next scene is the funeral. And it's like such a gut punch. Like
Yeah. Absolutely.
amazing. When he's running towards Gage 2, like it looks like this man is running like as fast as a man can run to,
Yeah,
and
it
you
really
can
does.
still tell like he's not gonna make it. And of course, you know he's not gonna make it, because you know about Pet Cemetery. But
Right.
in the cut too, right before like Gage, it's this toddler wandering into the road, and then the semi is coming towards him. He looks up at the semi, and they cut away when the truck is like inches away from this child. They cut to like within the trucker, like his point of view, and like suddenly he's like going 90 an hour, and then there's a child in the road, and like he slams a brake on and tries to swerve, and ends up flipping the truck, even trying to
Mhm.
get away from the kid, but like you still know what happens. They show this singular bloodied shoe. And like we said earlier, they spend the whole movie up until now just like showing this baby being cute and happy. Like, oh, they're brutal. They're so brutal.
They set it up expertly, really.
Yeah.
And child death in horror movies, for all the degenerate stuff that happens in horror movies, it's actually fairly rare. I really can't name that many movies where a kid dies. Of course, Pet Cemetery, or excuse me, the novel came out 6 years before this. This kind of scene just doesn't happen often. And you're right. You brought up the trucker's point of view. They do show the like a shot out of a semi truck and the baby in the road, and that's a big gut punch too. And then the funeral scene right after this is, uh, I mean, truly just hard to watch. It's an incredible scene in the book, but in the movie, we know, we can gather that Lewis doesn't have a great relationship with his father-in-law, but of course they're there at the funeral. And as Lewis is by the casket, obviously having a difficult time grasping the situation, for some reason his father-in-law decides this is the best time to come up to him and just rail into him about how bad of a father he was. And he is the reason that this happened. He punches Lewis and he knocks Lewis into the casket. And then, of course, Gage's body falls out of the casket. They do a really great, just effective shot of Gage's gray little hand falling out of the casket.
So this scene, I didn't like this scene. Did you like this scene?
Oh, I love this
I thought
scene.
the scene was dumb. I thought,
Really, I loved it.
yeah. Well, the father-in-law thing, they didn't have much time.
They
Like we
didn't.
said, this
That's
is a very short movie, and so much happens in it, and they really do a good job of juggling all these different elements of the story. But the whole like bad parent father-in-law thing is not done well. And like this feels really kind of out of the blue. We haven't even met the father-in-law character until this moment, I don't think. And it's literally at a funeral. He's just sitting minding his own business. This guy comes up and he says, "Where were you?" Punches him. Dramatically the casket falls and then the body falls out and then everybody's screaming and it's like so dramatic. Immediately after we saw the child die, it's like, okay, it's sad enough. Like we're good. We don't need this. It was sad. It was already depressing. This is not helping.
I like it.
I
I
feel
don't
like it
know.
was way too dramatic. And then like the bad acting, like it's not acted well. Like it's too dramatic. This part.
Oh, that's the truth, right? Like objectively, there is some horrible acting in this movie. I still really like the way the sequence is put together,
Yeah.
personally.
So the night of the funeral, Judd comes into Lewis's house. Lewis is alone again because Rachel just can't be in the house, has to leave, takes Ellie with her, and Lewis like sees her off at the airport, and like her parents pick her up, and it's once again like very poorly developed. His father-in-law is like, "Gee, sorry, Lewis. I was, I don't know what came over me. You know how it is. Funerals are crazy." Like,
That is what he does.
and then he's just like, "Okay, whatever."
Bygones be
Yeah,
bygones.
bygones be water under the bridge, and then yeah, but then that night, so Lewis is alone. Judd comes over and he's like, "Judd, don't bother me right now." And Judd's like, "Oh, I know what you're thinking about." He's like warning him not to, bury Gage in the pet cemetery in the cursed land.
I love to think that Lewis did not have the thought at all before Judd told him
And
that.
he was like, "Oh yeah."
He's like, "Oh wait, of course."
And here Judd tells him a story about how someone, a human person, actually did get buried there once, and he came back like a horrible zombie who was violent, and they had to form a lynch mob to kill him. And Judd was a part of that mob, and it was just like an abomination. And then that's when Judd says that classic line, "Sometimes dead is better." And sometimes it is. And
I mean, I'd have to agree with that.
Judd feels obligated to tell him all of this because he feels like he had a role in killing his son. He feels like by showing him the pet cemetery, he's helping the evil of the burial ground kind of work its magic. He characterizes it as kind of like anthropomorphic and sentient, and like it affects things. It has sort of like an evil power, and I love that. And that's something you see a lot in Stephen King works in general, and I'm
Mhm.
sure they go into that a lot more in the book. But
Yeah, they do. But really quick, I just want to talk about how good Fred Gwynn's
that's
performance
exactly what
is.
I was gonna say. Me and my
Oh,
brother literally said like, "Oh my god, it's so good this scene." He is
it's
acting
such a
his
good scene.
heart out.
No, yeah, he really is. I mean, it's such a good scene. He slams the table. There's
Oh
tears in his eyes. He's choking back tears.
yes, this is like another
Ugh.
scene that I was like, the emotion here, like I'm feeling it. I'm tearing up. It is so impressive, and once again, this is like typical Stephen King cheesy adaptation. Like that's what you're expecting, and then you get a scene like
Hmm.
this with acting like this. It takes you by
Hmm.
surprise, and then it feels like it adds to the effectiveness because you don't expect it to be this effective, and it completely takes you by surprise, and it's so good. I can't sing this man's praises enough.
Me neither. No, it's a great performance, all around. And Lewis, of course, does not listen to
Yeah, come on.
to Judd's warnings. He's also getting visions from Pascal, who is telling him not to do it as well. Um, but he goes. There is a very dramatic sequence in which he digs up his son's body. Uh, there's a very hokey moment where he picks up his boy in his arms, and it's very clearly a Cabbage Patch doll painted gray that he cries while holding. Um, but he's dug up the body. He goes to the Micmac burial ground, buries him overnight, and well, the rest ensues.
Yeah. I think it's like the last just shy over 30 minutes that Gage actually is back from the dead. So like the
Yeah.
whole movie is this build up, and it pays off really well. It doesn't feel like a slog, and the horror of this movie, it really comes more in the form of like grief. Like this sadness is really more impactful than any of the horror. The real horror is just like the fact that your loved ones are gone, and even if you think you have a way to bring them back, it's still not gonna work. It's still not gonna be the same. And the fact that he can't accept that doesn't change the fact that that's real and that's how it works.
No, yeah, that's a massive. They do get to that later on in the movie, but it's a massive. It's the theme of the book, really. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on how they wrap up this movie. But first,
If I may step in, first let's talk about Rachel's sister. It's good that you said that is the overarching theme of the book, because that is how this Rachel's sister plot works in to the movie. Rachel tells this story at some point in the film about how when she was a little girl, she had a sister who had spinal meningitis, and was they kept her in a bed where she slowly died for like over a year, and it got to a point where they ended up like hating her. They just wanted her to die. She was like she I think calls her like the family's dirty secret. She like regressed to the point like she couldn't talk, she couldn't really do anything except suffer, and they'd have to feed her like ground up food because she couldn't do anything else. And then one day her parents left her alone, and her sister started choking to death and started dying, and she didn't know what to do. And part of her wanted her sister to die because at that point they just hated seeing her, and they just it just turned into they hated her and they wanted her gone, and this like horrible guilt she's felt ever since then has haunted her, has caused a huge rift in her relationship with her family. This is maybe partly why her father and Lewis do not get along well. This is like why there's so much like relationship issues. And it kind of seems like this doesn't really have anything to do with this other plot, but throughout the movie Rachel keeps having like nightmare visions of her dead sister like being freaky and haunting her and stuff.
and she is horrifying
And
to look at.
she is horrifying to look at. This is not a pretty realistic depiction of spinal meningitis, but it is
No,
gruesome, however.
no, yeah, it's really, really kind of terrifying to watch.
Yeah, how did you feel about it all? I mean, you read the book. Maybe you can speak to.
In the book, if I'm not mistaken, we get more about her relationship with her sister. But it's overall the essence is there, right? She she has this guilt because she is relieved that her sister died, and she describes the day that her sister died. She runs out because she used to get left alone with her sister, and it was a horrifying experience for her because her sister was aggressive and agitated because she was in so much pain and so much discomfort. And in the movie and in the book, she describes running out of the house the day her sister died. And everybody thought that she was mad with grief because she was like weeping so hard. But she tells Lewis in confidence that she wasn't weeping. She was laughing because she was so happy that it was finally over. And it's really an unnerving monologue. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure what to make of it thematically. Well, I guess I do know what to make of it thematically. Sometimes dead is better,
Yeah,
right? I think
yeah,
that's the point. Damn, what a good movie.
yeah, and isn't it? Yeah, and the story in general, just all these heavy and abstract like themes and these emotions that like you really can't understand until you're in the throe of it. Like it does such a good job showing that, and just putting it on screen or in a book, I guess originally. But it's heavy. It's so heavy. Oh
Yeah.
man.
No, it really is.
So Gage, of course, returns. He comes back, goes into his father's room. His father is sleeping. He steals a scalpel from his doctor's bag, which I thought the doctor's bag was hilarious. Like he's a 1920s doctor that comes into your home and does surgery. He has this like little leather bag for all of his tools. And he had a scalpel in a velvet case. But, whatever. He takes the scalpel and then instead of killing his father, he goes across the street to Judd's house. And Judd, of course, is like not messing around. He knows, like, oh no, this isn't gonna end well. He's gonna be evil. And Judd goes upstairs to his bedroom. He's looking around and he's trying to find where this child is, and he's probably gonna do what needs to be done, because Judd is the biggest realist in this movie. He knows immediately what Lewis has done, but before Judd can get the best of Gage, Gage gets the best of Judd, and he slashes his Achilles tendon with the knife in what I think is probably one of the more iconic scenes from this movie, because it's and especially at this point in time, there hadn't been many movies that showed an Achilles tendon getting cut. But it's gruesome at first
Yeah.
when you watch it, because like just imagining it, it's like, oh, that's like the gore body horror.
Well, and it's such a debilitating thing too.
Yeah,
Like you can't run at that point. You're done. And then right after that, Judd screams in horror because and maybe pain at the same time because his Achilles tendon has just been slashed. And Gage slashes his mouth open, like or in half, right? He opens it like a I don't know, makes him look like a wide mouth bass.
yeah,
And then bites out his jugular.
yeah. And this is where the effects are like not believable, because this
Yeah.
child is freaking adorable even as a zombie
Yeah.
baby. He's so cute, and you do not believe he can do any harm in the world. Also, he's 3. Um
And
and
his
his
little hand holding
yeah,
the
he's
scalpel.
got a little baby hand holding the scalpel. Like they just painted him gray too. Like they didn't really do anything, which and I understand why all this is. He has like a fake scar on his head and then is painted gray. And
Right.
like that's it, and it doesn't look good at all. But also, like, a 3-year-old child is not going to sit and let you put gory makeup all over them.
No, it probably had to be quick and just enough, right?
Yeah, but it is also like in the movie where the cat who came back from the grave was amazing. This
Mm-hmm.
child is not amazing. But honestly, I think maybe working with a cat is easier than working with a 3-year-old.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm
Getting
sure
this
it's 10
cat
times
to
easier.
act is better than getting this child to act. I don't know.
Undoubtedly, it has to be.
Yeah, so you can kind of sympathize with that at least. All the other elements of the film still hit home, and it's not about the child looking scary at this point in the movie.
Right.
That's not what you're
Right.
here for. That's not what the movie's about.
The comedic murder does not stop there. Rachel, Lewis's wife, she is back home, and she is, of course, being haunted by the memories of her sister, especially now that she has been reminded of that situation. Um, but she is lured into Judd's home by a voice. And I think at first she's hearing mommy, mommy, from Gage. But then she starts to see and hear her sister. And, as she stumbles into Judd's house, she is shocked to see, yes, her dead son, or who she thought was dead. Um, and as she's looking at him, just kind of shocked, not knowing what to do, she makes notice of the scalpel. And just as she reaches down to hug him and to reconnect with him, because I think that's probably what you would actually do in that situation. You're full of grief. You don't know what to make of it. Uh, he brutally stabs her, and she dies.
Before she goes into Judd's room and finds his corpse, first she goes up the stairs, and she's gonna go into Judd's bedroom, but that's when she hears her sister from another door, and she opens it,
Right.
and it's that same room that we saw in the flashback from her childhood, and her sister's in it, but now she's not bedridden, and she's crawling around like this twisted ghoul, and she's talking about how she keeps saying like, I'm gonna twist your spine, Rachel, and you won't be able to move, and like it's really freaky. And after that she runs out of that room and into Judd's room, where she finds her son's body and gets killed. So meanwhile with Lewis, I guess, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, he's actually sleeping while all this is happening. But he does wake up. I don't remember what makes him shoot awake.
He fell asleep waiting for Gage to return, so I think he woke up like, is he back yet? And the first
Well,
thing he
yeah, and
sees are muddy child-sized
tiny,
footprints and a missing scalpel.
exactly. And it's just so funny because again, that bag is so ridiculous. Like his home visit
Yeah.
bag.
His cartoon bag.
Uh, then it starts to get a lot hokier than it already was. He ends up getting a haunted phone call from his son. Gage says that he had a good time playing with mommy and playing with Judd. And this is when he decides that the first connection he makes is I'm gonna go to my bag, I'm gonna get some syringes and fill them with morphine, I think it is. And this is like his defense mechanism. This is what he's gonna use to end it all. But I don't know, it was so funny, like how quickly he came to that conclusion to me. It's like, why did you bury the kid in the first place?
Yeah, no, I agreed too. And it was for me, I was also like, you're going to use a syringe?
Right.
That's not a very good weapon. I don't know. Maybe you need something a little heftier.
No, yeah, it's such a ridiculous weapon of choice, but whatever. When he goes to Judd's house, he kills the cat first because Church, by the way, is still around. He has never actually finished the job on Church like Judd did with Spot. Church has just been running rampant as a zombie cat. And he gets attacked by him, and he just decides to kill him once and for all. They do kind of show throughout the movie that Lewis hates that cat after he brings him back. He's been wanting to do this for a while, and he finally gets the opportunity to. But then we have the final showdown with him and Gage.
Yeah, so the first thing Lewis finds is a body under a blanket. He pulls the blanket back, and it's Judd's mutilated corpse, and his like bottom lip has been like eaten away, and his teeth are sticking out. And once again, it's a great effect. It's a great makeup effect juxtaposed to this terrible looking child. Like, once
Yeah, the
again,
contrast is
yeah.
obscene.
And I will say that more often than not, the effects are great in this movie, but
Yeah.
sometimes they're that cheesy Stephen King adaptation effects. It's just terrible. But he continues further in the house, and from the attic falls the corpse of his wife, which hangs on a noose. And
How
like,
the hell did that kid get the strength to
yeah,
do that?
well, I don't know how this toddler, like, I don't care how zombified your toddler is. I don't think it's gonna do any damage. But that's not the premise of this movie.
I'm just curious how he got her up there.
Yeah, I don't.
I mean, that would be difficult for me to do.
I mean, but this sight is horrifying, though. Like,
It
your
is.
back from the grave son, who you were just all you wanted to do was be with your loved ones again, has now taken another loved one from you, and like that in concept is horrifying. But then they continue to have this battle. In the battle is brief. It's Lewis overpowering Gage, of course, but at first Gage like bites him. He's cutting him with the scalpel, and Lewis kind of lets him because clearly he doesn't want to do the thing he has to do. He doesn't want to hurt Gage. He doesn't want to kill Gage. But as he's getting cut up, as his wife is hanging above them, he finds the strength to inject Gage, and then Gage like kind of just gives up and walks away and says like no fair, and he's adorable. And he goes into the other room where you assume he is killed. And immediately, what's the next thing you do? You burn the house down. So he burns the house down, but not before retrieving his wife's body and walking out with it.
And like, why?
It didn't work once. Why
Why?
would it work again?
Yeah, and this is something that the movie just will never be able to explain the way the book does. In the book, you follow him and his journey up the hill, what he's thinking, how he's feeling, why he's even considering doing this, but it's clear that he feels so alone that he wants to see if it works. In the movie, it's like such a stupid idea, and we get no justification. Him and his wife don't even seem to have that great of a relationship in the movie.
Yeah.
um,
This is the final time we see the ghost of Pascal, and he's like, "Don't do it. Why would you do it again?" And I think Lewis says, "It'll work this time because she only just died, and it was only recent." And like that
right.
justification came out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah, it makes
um,
zero sense.
but I understand. Like at this point in the movie, he's completely lost base with reality. He is grief stricken beyond all hope, and he's given up so much that he's willing to do something that will not work. He's willing to have complete false hope.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess he's basically lost everything.
Yeah. So
So why
he
not try it out?
yeah. So he buries Rachel. He waits for her that night. She returns and wow. Does this effect look amazing?
Which
Doesn't
one?
it? Rachel? Zombie Rachel?
Oh, like when she comes
Oh,
out,
she looks
or when she comes into the
great.
house
Yeah.
and
She
she's like
has like
matted.
her left eye is like completely gone and like the skull is exposed and there is a yellow liquid like seeping out of it and oozing down her face. And
Yeah, I just
she
want to know
looks
like where that came
gross.
from.
Yeah, no,
Like,
her body didn't have that. She's only been dead not even a full day, has been buried for a couple hours. Like she really shouldn't be that zombified, but she really is when she comes back. She's covered in like blood and dirt, sure, but also this like she's missing part of her face now. But I choose to ignore I choose to ignore the logic behind it because wow, is it such a good effect. And
oh yeah, it's
immediate
fun for sure.
yeah, I know it's great. And Lewis like immediately runs to her and just starts passionately kissing her. Just, because he has someone to hold again. And it's so
Yeah.
gross because like you're seeing the eye goo drip into their lips. It's like so gross.
It's a gross moment. It's desperate. And of course, you know what they're going to go for in the end. They do a wide shot and you're no longer just focused on their kiss. You start to see that as they are kissing, Rachel's zombie hand starts to crawl toward a knife on the table. She lifts it, cut to black, and all you hear is Lewis scream, and boom,
End of movie.
there's the movie.
End of movie.
Yeah,
And then cue
the
the
best part of the movie.
Ramones. Cue the
Dude, the best
Ramones,
part of the
dude.
movie. The best part of the movie is the freaking song that the Ramones made
Oh, it
for it.
really is. Well, it's like timed so well. Like cut to black, scream, and then Ramones. Like it's so cool. I I love when movies do that. Like there's music at the end that's so
Yeah.
clearly just like, and the movie's over. The movie's over. You're
You
listening
know,
to the Ramones now. I loved it.
people hate that song.
Oh, I love that song. I was listening
I
to it
think it's
earlier today
fantastic.
because we watched the movie last night.
Dude, I think it's so good. I think it's
So
so
good.
fun.
The song
And
rocks.
people really don't like it. Like, shockingly, they do not like it.
Nah, that song
Um,
rocks.
but no, if you haven't heard Pet Cemetery by the Ramones, look it up. It's just a banger. It's so good. I don't want to live my life again.
Wow. Yeah. This movie, amazing. I think absolutely one of the best Stephen King adaptations. And maybe this is just me, but I thought like I've known about this movie my whole life, even if I hadn't seen it. Like this is just the ones that like family members of mine would talk about ever since I was like a child. So like I knew kind of the plot before I'd even seen it, ever since I was a little kid. Maybe it's not as prolific as it was in my life specifically, but I do think this is one of the more prolific Stephen King adaptations, and it's definitely um, one of the better adaptations of all of his horror novels.
I remember going to Blockbuster and seeing the cover art and thinking, "Oh my god, that's so scary. I can't watch zombie pets like attack their owners." That's what I thought the movie was about my whole childhood. But then, of course, reading the book, seeing the movie now, I love the story. I really do. And though the book is not my favorite thing, and I think it's kind of overrated, I like the premise. I think it's fun, and I think the movie is just so hokey, but yet so effective at times that it's really worth a watch. I actually, you're gonna laugh at me, but after I watched this, because it's streaming on Netflix now, please go take advantage of that. But after I watched it, I ordered the Blu-ray, the special edition Blu-ray, because I was like, I need to own this movie.
Adrian move. I remember seeing it in my grandfather's movie room, like in his movie library.
Yeah,
So
it's good. It's good, man.
I'm so glad we got to talk about it. I love this movie, and I think it's a staple of the horror genre. I think like you really should see this movie.
Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you don't love it, you'll enjoy the ride, and that's a promise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a very long movie either. Well, thank you so much for joining me and talking about this movie with me, Adrian.
It was a blast.
It was such a good time. Yeah.
I would die, get buried, and do it all over again if I had to.
I don't want to be buried in a pet
In a
cemetery.
pet cemetery?
So
That's true.
okay. Thank everybody for listening. Goodbye.